Welcome to the presentation on Dr. Jack Halton, the Singing Doctor. As you can see, John, nicknamed Jack, was born in England in 1868 and joined the British Navy as a midshipman at age 14. He left the British Navy to attend Miami Medical College in Cincinnati, Ohio. He practiced medicine in Cincinnati and later Muncie, Indiana, where he met his second wife, Edna Swain. His daughter Edith was from a previous marriage. His other children were Dorothy and Jack Jr. The story of Sarasota has Dr. Jack visiting Sarasota during Thanksgiving 1904. To escape the winters of the North, he decided to move his family and practice to Sarasota in early 1905 at age 36. The first mention I found of the Halton family in Sarasota was from an article in the Manatee River Journal dated May 23, 1905, concerning the marriage of the mayor of Sarasota, J. Hamilton Gillespie, to Miss Blanche McDaniel at the Episcopal Mission Church of the Redeemer. For being in Sarasota a short time, the Halton family had a major part in the ceremony. Both Dr. and Mrs. John Halton sang solos, and Mrs. Halton's sister, Mrs. Brinbecker, played the organ. Note, when the Bradentown paper mentions Dr. Jack Halton, they use his proper name, John, and most of the time the Sarasota newspaper used his nickname, Jack. Also note, Bradentown, mentioned in this biography, is today's Bradenton. The first ad of Dr. John Halton's business in the Bradentown's newspaper was dated September 1905. Dr. John Halton was an EENT specialist, also known as eye, ears, nose, and throat. What he may not have known was earlier doctors had a hard time in making a living in Sarasota. Sarasota was a small town with generally a poor population. In 1905, the population was 788. 568 white, 220 black. Doctors and businessmen would rarely get paid with cash if patients could afford to pay at all, and many would only go to doctors as a last resort. Dr. Jack had set up his medical office in the old company store building at the time owned by Harry Heigl at Gulfstream Avenue and Lower Main Street, across from the Belhaven Inn. In October 1905, Dr. Halton joined the newly formed Sarasota Commercial Club and was part of two committees, the Committee on Constitution and Bylaws and the Committee on Advertising. As the newest doctor in Manatee County, Sarasota was part of Manatee County at that time, he was assigned to be the official doctor at the first legal hanging in the county, that of Edward Lamb, who had murdered C.D. Kennedy near the Braden River the previous January. The hanging apparatus didn't work as expected, so Mr. Lamb passed out but didn't die on the first hanging attempt. He was helped up unconscious for the second attempt, which was successful. Dr. John Halton pronounced him dead. Dr. Jack's brother, Dr. Joseph Halton, and parents followed him down to Sarasota. Joe was a general practitioner, set up an office in town, did house calls, and was very loyal and generous to Sarasota. He also had the Halton singing voice. In December of 1905, the Bradentown Episcopal Christ Church Ladies Guild offered a concert which included the singing of Dr. and Mrs. John Halton. Dr. Halton, after forming the Sarasota Minstrel Club, came back to Bradentown in April 1906 to perform minstrel shows at Bradentown's Warren Opera House. All were benefit performances, the first for the Sarasota Episcopal Mission and the second for the San Francisco earthquake victims. Note, typically minstrel shows at this time were blackface, but I have no evidence of this happening on Dr. Jack's shows one way or another until the Shrine Club minstrels in the late 1920s. The November 1906 ad indicates that Dr. John Halton opened a second office in Bradentown and would split his time between Sarasota and Bradentown. Just not enough business in Sarasota alone. One of his more important patients, attorney Charles T. Curry, had his eyes operated on and required a dark room for a week. John did have time in his busy schedule to attend a meeting in Tampa of the Florida Medical Association with his brother, Dr. Joe. While in Bradentown, John's musical talent was utilized more often. He and his wife assisted with the Episcopal Christ Church choir when Bishop William Crane Gray preached at that church. The Easter service in Bradentown Episcopal Church, Dr. John Halton was the choir director, and Dr. and Mrs. John Halton and Dr. Joe Halton were choir members. Also, Mrs. Bridden Becker was at the organ. In addition, April 19th, the newspaper announced Passion Slave, where Dr. Jack played a big part. Also, Dr. and Mrs. Jack Halton had solos in a benefit event for the Bradentown Library Association. In May, the Bradentown Episcopal Christ Church service with Bishop Gray, the choir was assisted by Doctors Jack and Joe and Mrs. Halton. In June, on St. John's Day, Dr. Jack presented to the Bradentown Masons the popular idea of Masonry. So much for Sarasota. In July 1907, Dr. Jack rents a cottage in Bradentown and moves his family there. His ad lists only Bradentown as the location of his office. He also installed an X-ray machine. Further education. Dr. Jack often took time off during the summer to take courses and intern in the North. In 1907, he went to New York Eye and Ear Infirmary. In 1908, he went to several New York clinics. In 1916, at Richmond, Virginia, he studied several cases of surgical operations. In 1919, he went to New York for more studies. In 1921, went to Philadelphia to do postgraduate courses on nose and throat surgery. In 1922, he worked at the Mayo Brothers Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. The Union Thanksgiving services combined all the churches of the city, and the Union Choir was under the direction of Dr. John Halton. December 1907, John was so popular that he was elected the president and musical director of the Bradentown Choral Society for 6 months. The same week, Dr. Joseph Halton was elected as the city physician for Sarasota and voted to the executive committee of the newly reorganized Sarasota Board of Trade. Sanitarium definition: an establishment for the medical treatment of people who are convalescing or have a chronic illness. With eye operations, Halton's patients needed a quiet, dark room for a period of time. With his medical offices, he didn't have the space to provide a spot for recovery. Dr. Halton wanted a place a little bigger, enough to handle 5 patients at one time. He would bring in a skilled nurse to run the facility, and he would name it the Bradentown Sanitarium. He found such a building on the west side of Prospect Avenue, leased it, and moved his office into it by mid-January. The professional nurse, Miss Eberts, arrived in mid-February. The Haltons were still in demand in Bradentown. In January, Dr. Jack sang 3 songs in a Presbyterian recital at the Manna Vista Hotel. He participated in a concert for the benefit of the Baptist Church as director of the choral club at the Manna Vista Hotel Music Room in February. It was so well received that he repeated the concert at Warren's Opera House in March. At Easter, he led the music at Christ Church at a service celebrating the culmination of Reverend Johnston as pastor. Normally, you would see Mrs. John Halton included in the musical headlines. However, during this time in March, she delivered a son, Jack Jr., to the Halton family, weighing 10 pounds. In April of 1908, something was in the winds. Faithfully, John had advertised his practice in the local newspaper, but April 17th was the last time his practice was advertised in the Manatee River Journal. Also, Mrs. Halton and the children took a holiday at the Belhaven Inn at Sarasota, the place business made him abandon. The answer came in May. J. Hamilton Gillespie had just finished an artificial stone building on Sarasota Bay, which he called the Gillespie Sanatorium. He offered to lease it to Dr. Jack Halton. Gillespie's sanitarium was large, spacious, with a dock on Sarasota Bay. As was normal, Dr. Halton left to New York in July for 6 weeks to advance his skills in his specialty. Nurse Eberts took charge of the sanitarium. Although reports said that he would keep open the Bradentown Sanitarium, he abandoned it, and the building was leased to another party in late August. From what we have seen previously, Dr. John Halton could not make a go of a practice in Sarasota, so he moved to Bradentown. Why would he move back unless there was a way to be more successful than his first try? He loved the attention he received in Bradentown with the choral groups, plays, and church services because of his and his wife's beautiful voices. But I think he missed being close with his brother and parents who lived in Sarasota. That also shows up later in life when he thinks about moving away. He's a doctor, but he is also an entertainer. He also knew about the increased tourism to the area. What if he ran a hotel and also ran his business from that hotel? If you reserved 1 or 2 bedrooms for surgery or recovery, it would work great. During peak seasons, winter and tarpon season, the hotel would be full with guests, and on off-season, he would use it primarily as an office and sanitarium. The headline and picture was from the Tampa Tribune, February 14, 1909, exalting the benefits of the sanitarium, or sanatorium, with a 600-foot deep artesian well, healthy, just slightly sulfur-tasting water, concrete stone construction, 22 rooms. The rooms may be had en suite with bath or singly. Each room has a stationary sanitary porcelain wash bowl with hot and cold water. It had a reception room with a grand piano, tennis court, and croquet grounds. The hotel offered boating, fishing, and beach bathing activities. Dr. Jack changed the name from the Gillespie Sanitarium to the Halton. Articles about Halton's sanitarium were plentiful, and so were the articles about the Halton Hotel. In the end, it became a hostelry that housed his practice. You will see later on he used the same model when he managed the Belhaven Inn. In this picture, you can barely see the tennis court with 2 players on the right side of the building. That is Gulfstream Avenue running right in front of the Halton. Here is a picture of the Halton tennis court. His eye surgery patients wouldn't need a tennis court or croquet lawn. In an article in January 1910, a tourist made this comment about the Halton. The Halton, we felt that we were led. To tell the truth, we were a little wary of it when we found that, though a small hostelry now, it had been a sanitarium 3 years ago. But the fact has given comforts which otherwise would not have been provided. After a few days in the general surroundings with the delicious home table and wholesome cordiality of Dr. Halton and his attractive wife, we lost all hesitation and yielded to the charm of the tranquil, healthful atmosphere. The glass building where Bayfront turns into North Tamiami Trail is the site of the past The Halton. On December 29, 1909, Dr. John Halton almost drowned. Charles V. Swain jumped in to save him. The Sarasota Times reported, Swain swam 400 feet to Halton, who had been caught by a swift current in Big Sarasota Pass in water 15 feet deep. Drawing Halton's arms across his shoulders, Swain swam across the current and against a strong wind until he got into a current paralleling the shore. Still supporting Halton, who was almost unconscious, Swain swam and drifted to shallow water, and from there dragged Halton to shore, where he revived him. Swain swam and drifted with Halton almost 900 feet. In May 9, 1912, the Sarasota Times reported that Charles V. Swain won a Carnegie Bronze Medal for his heroic deed, along with $1,000. Note: Dr. Jack was 41 and as a youth had been a British midshipman, so he should have been able to swim. And Charles Swain was his nephew. The Sarasota Times periodically reported the names of the guests registered at the local hotels. This report was for the Halton Hotel. The persons most familiar are Mr. and Mrs. Ralph C. Caples from New York, Sarasota's largest boosters. There is an ad for Dr. Jack Halton's practice at the Halton Hotel. Seems like the doctor identifies the building as a hotel. This is in January 20th. The Haltons threw a dance at the Halton for the town's youth and sang for them. Bertha Palmer from Chicago got interested in Sarasota in February 1910 after seeing an ad about land for sale. She talked to J.H. Lord in Chicago and arranged to travel to Sarasota later in the month. The Sarasota Times reported that Mrs. Palmer wired for reservations at the Belhaven Inn. The manager of the Belhaven Inn, Mr. Whipple, could not honor the ensuite requirements because those rooms were occupied, so he made arrangements at the Halton for the Palmers. All the guests at the Halton enjoyed Dr. Jack's accommodation with watercraft. The Palmers took some time fishing with the doctor and enjoyed it immensely. I would think that Dr. Jack Halton's hospitality was a big factor in the Palmers investing in the area. Dr. Jack was a supporter of the Sarasota Episcopal Mission Church of the Redeemer. Here is a picture of the mission building, probably on Morrill Street and Orange Avenue. The men shown from left to right are Dr. Jack Halton, the Episcopal Bishop Crane Gray, and J. Hamilton Gillespie. In May of 1910, Bishop Crane Gray made the appointments for the Episcopal Mission. J. Hamilton Gillespie, the golfing mayor, as lay reader and senior warden. Judge R.P. McDaniel, Gillespie's father-in-law and friend, as junior warden. Dr. Jack Halton as secretary, William Steer Saxby as treasurer, and Dr. Jack's father, Henry Halton, as vestryman. You can find the current Church of the Redeemer at Gulfstream Avenue and Ringling Boulevard. A time of change. You will note the name of Owen Burns as a guest of the Halton. Owen Burns had come to Sarasota for the fishing and decided this was where he wanted to live. He went back to Chicago and made arrangements for his move. When he came back, he talked with J. Hamilton Gillespie and found he was willing to part with most of his holdings in Sarasota, so Burns went for it. Instantly, he became the largest landowner in Sarasota, owning the Halton building, the Gillespie block at 5 Points, Gillespie's house on Morrill Street, and many more properties. Dr. Jack reacted. Neighbors complained about the cesspool smell at the Halton a few months before Dr. Jack closed his hotel. Owen Burns was tasked by the town council to fix the unsanitary condition of affairs in the rear of the Halton. The Sarasota Times reported Dr. Jack Halton went to Richmond, Virginia to secure a long-term lease, 3 years, on the Belhaven Inn from the Southern Investment Company. As with the Halton, Jack Halton moved his practice into that hotel. Dr. Jack and the Southern Investment Company made updates and repairs to the building before opening the hotel to the public. The updates in 1910 included new fireplaces, more bathrooms on every floor, public and private, a totally new kitchen, a new building to house a furnace providing heat to the whole Belhaven during the cooler days of winter, fire escapes, a hot water circulating system, correcting the sewage, and supplying electricity to all parts of the building, which required an additional 125 lights. An ad showing Dr. Halton's EENT clinic was now at the Belhaven Inn. He was still entertaining guests at the Halton, as the Sarasota Times of September 29, 1910 states. Guests of the Halton entertain. Dr. Jack Halton entertained Sunday with one of his famous picnic lunches at Uncle Ben Stickney's romantic grounds on Siesta Island. We were off at 11 a.m., arriving at the grounds at 12:30, where all with a willing hand soon had the table spread with the good things that Dr. Jack only can serve. During the dinner hour, Uncle Ben entertained us with his graphophone with selections of music from most of the famous artists. After luncheon, we all enjoyed a dip in the surf, which was just right to settle a hearty meal. Just at twilight, we packed up the remains of the day, and after bidding Uncle Ben goodbye, we started for the Halton house. On our arrival, we found dainty sandwiches and coffee waiting us. After doing justice to these, we unanimously agreed that another enjoyable day, never be forgotten, was a record of the past. The newspaper also reported on October 6th that Dr. Jack Halton will give up the sanitarium about November 1st and will devote his entire time to the management of the Belhaven Inn. We are informed that the owner of the sanitarium, Mr. Owen Burns, will occupy it as a residence for the winter with a party of relatives and friends. The Jack Halton family moved into the Dancy House on Main Street. Jack Halton wrote an editorial commending the council for passing the anti-spit ordinance. A cartoon produced by the Florida Flower in April 1911 showing who they considered as Sarasota boosters. This was before the Ringlings came here. Notice Dr. Jack Halton in the top center. The Halton patriarch died in June 1911. His sons living in Illinois came down for the funeral. He was buried in Rosemary Cemetery. When the three sons from Illinois went back, Mrs. Henry Halton went with them for a long visit. After visiting Sarasota for his dad's funeral, James Halton decided to move his family, wife and son, to that city. They moved into their parents' house on 8th Street, now 2nd Street. As the perfect host at the Belhaven Inn, Dr. Jack bought a car to pick up guests at the railroad depot and the city dock. Note the inscription, Belhaven Inn, Sarasota, Florida, on the hood. At the end of October 1911, Dr. and Mrs. Halton traveled to Richmond, Virginia, to discuss improvements to the Belhaven Inn with the Southern Investment Company, traveled to New York to get more workers for the hotel, and traveled to Washington, D.C. to present a paper on diseases and cures of the eye to the Seaboard Airline Railway Surgeons Convention. Other Seaboard Surgeons Conventions the Haltons attended were, in October 1914, at Petersburg, Virginia, he presented a paper, First Aid to the Injured. He also sang a duet with his wife. In August 1915, he went to Wilmington, North Carolina. In November 1916, he went to Jacksonville, Florida. He was asked to either dance a jig, give a lecture, or sing a song. Dr. Jack decided to sing the Bug Song with his wife accompanying on piano. September 1919, he went to Richmond, Virginia. In May 1923, he went to Jacksonville to the Florida Railway Surgeons and the Florida Medical Association. He gave a talk on fistulo in ano, its etiology and treatment. Dr. Halton purchased his parents' house or cottage on Coconut Avenue in November 1911 and moved his family in January of 1913. I assume his brother found another place to live during that time. The consummate singer and actor John, for one show only, played the commander in the play HMS Pinafore, which played in the Palms Theater near Five Points. When his 3-year lease was almost up, he expressed his desire to give up the hotel business and concentrate on his medical career. He states in his ad, late of New York Eye and Ear Infirmary, will hereafter devote his entire time to the medical profession. By September of the same year, he had moved his clinic to the Gillespie building at Five Points. John was voted in as president of the Sarasota Board of Trade in 1913. Dr. and Mrs. Jack Halton and some lady friends were involved in an auto accident where the doctor's car ran into a county street roller. Although shaken up, no one was seriously hurt. Under the auspices of the Sarasota Yacht and Automobile Club, Dr. Jack Halton revived the Minstrels. A benefit show for the Yacht Club and the Women's Club was planned for early March in Sarasota. Then 2 nights in Tampa as a benefit for the Tampa Elks Lodge. The St. Petersburg show almost didn't happen because of lack of early sales, but with determination they put on a show for their local Elk Lodge. They actually put on 2 minstrel shows in St. Pete, another one in Bradentown, and a final one in the Palms Theater in Sarasota. When in St. Petersburg, the minstrels marched in 2 parades honoring the explorer DeSoto. Dr. Halton put in a new verse in his song, Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat, new lines that were a precursor to next year's Sarah DeSoto celebration in Sarasota. You are honoring DeSoto like everything else you do. The Sarasota Yacht Club is glad to do so too. Next year, his daughter Sarah will honor, you'll see, with pageants grand and glorious, so let's be neighborly. In addition to the shows, a number of the minstrels surprised Mr. Worcester on Bird Key and had a delightful night of cheer and song. On July 23, 1914, Dr. Jack Halton family moved into one of J.H. Lord's cottages on Mango and 7th Street, now 1st Street. He sold his house, but not the lot, to a Mrs. Pierce, who had the house moved to her lot on 9th Street. The picture is not the actual move of Mrs. Pierce, but it is a move of a house to Siesta Key. In those days, a lot of house moving was common. Dr. Jack had cleared the lot so that a new $3,000 bungalow could be built, corner of Coconut Avenue and 9th Street, today's Fruitville. The family moved into their new house before Christmas of 1914. The Sarasota Yacht and Automobile Minstrel Club organized, and Dr. Jack Halton was elected president and director and also a member of the production committee. The dates for the shows in Sarasota were Wednesday, Friday 10th, and Friday, February 12th of 1914. On Wednesday, February 10th at 1 o'clock, the Boy Scouts, the Minstrel Band, and the Minstrels gave a parade, and before the evening performance opened, they sang several songs. The performance at the Palms Theater in Sarasota was a success. On Thursday, they played at Bradentown, and Friday back in Sarasota. The Minstrel Club was financially successful that year. One songstress of note was Mrs. Ellen Cables. In examining school students, Dr. Halton discovered an eye abnormality common to many. To fix the problem required a slight operation to the eyelids, medical care, and a dark room for 3 days. There was no facility in Sarasota able to handle the number of children that had the problem. However, this was the slow season for hotels, and Jack was able to get J.H. Lord to donate the DeSoto Hotel, previously known as the Sarasota House, for a month to handle the situation. Bertha Palmer and her son Honore both contributed $100 each, and the Women's Club helped with management. 2 nurses were hired, and 10 children at a time would go through the procedure until all had been treated. Dr. Halton did the procedure for free to those that couldn't pay. The U.S. Surgeon Niedergar, along with State Board of Health Surgeon Bartlett, conferred with Halton about the children's eye problems. The Sarasota Yacht and Automobile Minstrel Club gave a performance to benefit the temporary hospital. On March 8th, early in the morning, Sarasota had its largest fire to date. It was known as the $100,000 fire. It burned the buildings on the north side of Lower Main Street from 5 Points up to the Iverson buildings. The Sarasota Times reported, Dr. Jack Halton was kept busy removing cinders from the firemen's and others' eyes who were in close proximity to the burning building. Those who were injured were taken to the Sarasota Hotel, where the temporary hospital proved its worth. Dr. Joseph Halton lost his entire office equipment, including instruments and a fine library. His insurance covered the part of the building he owned. He has opened for the president an office at the Bank of Sarasota building. Dr. Jack Halton felt this was the time to create a permanent hospital in Sarasota. He arranged to lease the building from Mr. Lord and set up it properly. It had a reception room, doctor's private office, library, consultation room, electrotherapeutics room, an x-ray department. Room 3 was devoted to eye work and testing for glasses. Room 4 was an ear, nose, and throat department. It had a large operating room and 3 rooms devoted to patients. The dining room was a ward containing 8 beds for needy patients. There were 2 nurses from New York, Miss E. Anderson and Miss Mabel Meyer. Also a Miss Minsky of New York was in charge of housekeeping. The operating room was available to all physicians. From March 1st through the 9th, the temporary hospital had 213 patients. From March 9th through March 22nd, it had 366 patients, a total of 549 patients. Dr. Jack Halton's ad indicating Sarasota Hospital as his office. Several accolades were written in the Sarasota Times about the Sarasota Hospital. The Sarasota Times, J. Barney Lowe, M.D., Reverend George L. Thompson, and others. The town tried to support the costs of the hospital by giving benefits. Sarasota Minstrels, Women's Club Silver Tea, and the Women's Club Linen Shower, giving donations of money and equipment, beds, linen, wheelchair, etc., and donating time. However, as the Sarasota Times on October 14th reported, partly because of the charity work, the expenditures far exceeded the income, as shown in this report of Sarasota Hospital. What I don't see in this report was all the new equipment bought by Dr. Jack Halton. The writing was on the wall, and in the next 2 months, the hospital closed, with Dr. Halton taking the brunt of the loss. The Jack Halton medical ad showed that he had moved his offices to the Iverson building. What's done is done, and Dr. and Mrs. Halton still did musical benefits for the Church of the Redeemer. The newest theater, the Virginian, opened up on Main Street in March of 1916. The opening act was the Sarasota Minstrels, led by Dr. Jack Halton. In April, the Minstrels were welcomed again in Tampa for the benefit of the Tampa Rotary Club. In May, Jack and his brother Joe and fellow Sarasota Dr. C.B. Wilson attended the Florida Medical Association at Arcadia. I thought this a little odd. Jack Halton requested that he be made city physician for the year, and he was. Oh, but the World War got in the way. In April 1917, he took a physical to become a Navy surgeon and passed with flying colors. His temporary rank was lieutenant while he waited an assignment. In August, he was promoted to captain and sent to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. In September, he was given some time off to speak in Sarasota and Tampa about camp life. He authored a book in December, The Barrack Room Jingles. The next March, he led several entertainers at the YMCA huts. He was given 2-week furloughs in December 1918 and April 1919. After his April furlough, he was promoted to major and assigned to Camp Sevier, South Carolina. By September 1919, he was no longer needed. The war was over, and he was put on inactive duty and sent home. While in the service, he studied rectal diseases, and a month after he returned home, he decided to open an office in Tampa at the Citizens Bank building. But even though he probably would have built a bigger business in Tampa, he missed his family, who had stayed in Sarasota for the winter, and his brothers Joe and James, and returned to Sarasota. His medical ads in January and February of 1920 showed that he had resumed his practice in Sarasota, that he was at the Sarasota Bank building at 5 Points, and that he specialized in proctology. In June of 1920, he was honored by being made a Fellow of the American Proctologic Society, and the following year in June attended the annual meeting of the American Proctologic Association and the American Medical Association in Boston. Jack was very active in the creation of the American Legion offices in Florida, where he was distinguished with the rank of Vice Commender, 1st District. In July of 1921, he attended a meeting of the State Officers and Executive Committee for the Florida American Legion in Jacksonville. He helped establish the Bartow Post in September and attended the State Legion meeting in Ocala in December. Dr. Jack was seriously ill in February and March of 1922, having to forego running his office and attending to his American Legion duties. He recovered and hit the road by attending a Tampa reception for the American Legion National Commander at the end of March, assisting in creating the Lakeland American Legion Auxiliary, and in June spoke at the Bradentown dedication of the Kirby Stewart Post Headquarters. He had local support in running for the post of Florida State Legion Commander in May of 1923. In March of 1922, he joined the Jack King Comedians for one night, playing the part of a colonel in Ku Klux Klan, presented by the Sarasota American Legion Post. More medical meetings. In June of 1922, he attended the American Medical Association meeting in St. Louis, and the next January he attended the Hillsborough County Medical Association meeting and banquet in Tampa. Jack was one of the initial organizers for the Sarasota Kiwanis Club. Here he is in the picture in November 1922 of the Kiwanis Club, Dr. Jack standing in the back row. In February of 1923, Jack was named to the music committee for the Alabama-Florida District, Kiwanis International. In March, he attended the Kiwanis Convention in Atlanta as the district trustee, after which he traveled to Pensacola to attend the Florida meeting of the Kiwanis and address the Pensacola American Legion Post. In 1927, Jack and Joe Halton sang the Larboard Watch for the Sarasota Kiwanis Club meeting at the Terrace Hotel, now the County Administration Building on Washington and Ringling. A picture of the Sarasota minstrels in front of the Florentin in Bradentown. I do not have info associated with the picture, but you can see J. Hamilton Gillespie in his British military attire, third from the left foreground, which he was allowed to wear for processions. He arrived back in Sarasota about June 1919 and he died September 1923, so it had to be somewhere between those dates. Another picture of Dr. Jack at a Miramar Hotel fashion show in 1924. In 1927, Dr. Jack Halton was involved with another minstrel show offered by the Shrine Club Minstrels. This minstrel performance was in blackface, which was common in those days. In 1933, at age 65, Dr. Jack Halton was still reading scientific papers at the joint meeting of the Sarasota and Manatee County Medical Associations. According to the St. Petersburg Times, Dr. Jack, age 73, was a patient of the Veterans Bay Pines Hospital and he collapsed at Webb's drugstore and died of a heart attack. A picture of Dr. Jack at Bay Pines before his death. He was buried in Bay Pines Cemetery. Winifred Halton was listed as his wife. Larry Sewell, his grandson, had no recollection of Winifred. Thank you for attending this talk. Any questions? Thank you.